I'm really excited to be here today with Cynthia Chu. Cynthia is the CFO and Chief Growth Officer at Audible. And Cynthia and Audible have been amazing partners to MBB Capital over the years. So welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be on this podcast.
Awesome. Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
And Cynthia, I'm really excited to kind of get into it with you because you wear two hats, two functional hats at a very large enterprise, Audible. And so your one functional hat is CFO.
Yep.
Your second functional hat is Chief Growth Officer, which is a very unique combination.
Yes.
So just kicking it off, I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about your progression, your career journey as a CFO, and how you've interacted with sort of the buy versus build decisions over time.
Yeah, so at Audible, I've been at Audible for almost 10 years. This is actually my third CFO role. Prior to coming to Audible, I worked at NBC Universal, a global media company, for over a decade. And there I had been part of smaller buying journey to larger procurement endeavor, so to say.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting because at NBC, larger company, usually they have internal whole department dedicated for buying. And a lot of times what we would do is the business unit would be part of some of these decisions, but usually they're buying across and trying to find software that fit multiple different needs. At Audible, it's a little bit, we're part of a bigger conglomerate, but we also deal with and make a lot of those purchasing decisions ourselves. And so at Audible, it's unique in the sense that we're also a technology company. So we're at the intersection of we're run by and work with a lot of builders.
Yeah.
We oftentimes, when we go through that decision making, it's truly really looking at build versus buy, but not through just a financial sense, but it's really thinking about like what makes sense for the business, what is actually the business objectives that we're trying to achieve, and then work backwards from there. Of course, financial is part of that.
Yeah.
And but that would be, some of the differences and evolution that I have experienced through over the last 20 decades.
Very, very cool. And maybe we can dig into the buy versus build framework.
Yeah.
Can you kind of help me understand what that buy versus build framework looks like today at Audible? And maybe if there's an example you can share about when you used that and when you made one decision or another.
So one actually live decision that we're going through right now is I had to do my dual head, marketing technology, that we're looking to really modernize and automate and, quite frankly, infuse AI into a lot of our journey management. Being at Audible, our unique position, if you will, is that we do work and have to use a lot of the tools that are from our parent company, Amazon. And so in this buy versus build example, the team we had to actually look at what are the part of the workflow that we would have to use internal or second party, so to say, tools versus what are the best in class point solution, if you will, out there in the marketplace. And we look at those and think about like what are the hybrid model when we look at that. There's also beyond financial consideration, there's time to market, because the space that we operate in is highly competitive and move very fast. So we don't want to be, of course, we can probably build anything that we want if we are given the time and resources, but that is not the case. And so what we have to really consider is those dimension, if you will, time, resources. Do we want to, devote resources that could have been building customer-facing technology? We're in the business of providing digital storytelling to our customers. So do we? Those are the trade-off decision, if you will, that we make when we look at buying a piece of software, or how do we integrate a piece of software. But it really germinates from what are the business use case, what are the objectives that we're trying to achieve, work backward from that.
And the speed to market is really interesting, because I think you can make a case, depending on what company you're leading, that build could be faster or buy could be faster. I think it depends on the functional area.
Exactly.
How do you, and so where does speed to market sit in your priority decision making?
Well, I would say it depends on, again, coming back to the business case that we're trying to do. So in this case that I was just mentioning, it was a outbound journey management. So for email and like push notification and all of that channel management. And what we found out is that the third-party point solution is actually much more fit for purpose, if you will, what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
Versus if we try to build it.
So in that case, you can hit the ground running. What's interesting is when we're talking about third-party software, it's like we invest in startups, as you know, and then third-party software can go all the way up to like Salesforce, right, which is a quarter of $1 trillion company, right? So how do you think about working with external vendors relative to size?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I would say first and foremost, what we look for is, does this partner or vendor understand what we're trying to do? What I often find, honestly, a little bit of a pet peeve is when company come to us or vendor come to us and they pitch to us in a little bit too generic of a term of the industry. And I didn't really quite do the homework of understanding what we're trying to achieve.
Right.
And what are some of the specific use cases that are for us at Audible. And as I said before, because of our unique nature sitting within a big company in Amazon, there are certain requirements, info security requirement, data security we take very seriously. We just, those are some of the requirements that we expect our vendor to understand what we have to go through and be willing to work with us to go through that. Because without those, we won't be able to kind of move forward with any sort of vendor relationship. So I would say sometimes what I found interestingly is some of these bigger enterprise, in fact, might actually take some of those relationship building for granted.
Interesting.
And smaller and mid-sized company, they actually are a lot more, their selling process, I should say, or the approach is more bespoke and unique. And that actually helps because it shows to us that you actually are willing to understand where we're coming from and what are some of the unique requirements that we have.
I think a lot of our founders and probably founders in general are excited to hear something like that, right? Because it's like the advantage of a smaller company is that you can be nimble and you can do the extra work. And so, otherwise that you don't have anything.
Exactly, because in this example that I just cited before, a point solution, we actually went with a smaller company. But the reason why we went with them was because of the partnership that they had shown from the beginning of the RFP, going through the process, compared to some of their much, much bigger competitors.
Got it. I love that.
Yeah.
And also, because you kicked it off with your marketing hat, let's go deeper in that space. There's a lot going on with Gen AI today. And at MVP Capital, we're really focused on vertical AI and the opportunities in generative AI to change workflow. But marketing is an area where there's just like so much going on.
Yes.
How did that inform, you looking for a new vendor, or how has Gen AI sort of changed your thinking on marketing?
I think it's changing pretty much everything that we do, both internal productivity and the workflow.
Interesting.
To externally, how do we serve and how do we make sure that the product experience for our customer is good? So there's like kind of the actual part of our product solution, as well as internally, how do we actually serve our customer? And so I would say right now, speed, honestly, velocity is a very important, I would say when I think about some of these different trade-off dimension, speed become a more important dimension in when we're thinking about, do we build ourselves? Do we consider partnering with a external vendor? And also, I think one of the things that, going back to my earlier point, really understanding what are the business and customer outcome we're trying to achieve, work backwards from that, because otherwise we'll just be building or buying or integrating software just for that sake of integrating software. That's not what we're trying to do here. So I think there's a lot of shiny new object out there.
Yes, it's true.
There's all companies, big or small, are really trying to get into space, and how is Gen AI or agentic AI, these agents are going to do for you. And I would say that we're trying to take a flexible approach, because we just don't know where the puck is going to go into the future. And we want to make sure that whatever we implement today is what we internally call two-way door, meaning we're not going into building such a big solution that is a one-way door when things are just changing so fast. Technology or capability 6 months ago, it's already super, super different. And so like that's the mental model that we're employing right now.
That makes a lot of sense. And the two-way door analogy, I guess it's a Jeff Bezos thing, right?
Yeah.
And we actually think about it a lot because like for us, a one-way door is making an investment. Can't get our money back.
Yeah.
But buying software could be a one-way door,
Yeah.
could be a two-way door depending on how you implement it.
Depending on how big that implementation is. And then also the opportunity cost and the trade-off in time.
Yeah.
And so we try to stay nimble, even though we're a bigger company. We try to be like stay day one, stay nimble, because this space is just like evolving so quickly.
It is evolving so quickly, and I did a panel last week with a few leaders in like the AI space, and I walked away thinking I just have to almost reassess what we're looking at from an investment standpoint, almost on like a monthly basis, right? Where we used to kind of come up with a thesis every year, and we'd sort of mine that thesis, and things are moving so quickly.
Every quarter,
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Let's pivot to your other leadership hat, which is as a CFO.
Yep.
How does making buying decisions, either third-party software or third-party services, how is that different with the CFO hat on versus the growth hat?
That's a very interesting question. I actually don't think it's a binary different hats, if you will. Really thinking about like the impetus of putting my role together, while it's unique, is actually making sense in the sense that putting the financial rigor, infusing that with customer growth and revenue generation, and what do we need to do to generate customer value and begets business output and all of that. It actually does make sense to put these together. And so the way that I approach things is always coming from, again, going back to what are the customer outcome, business outcome that we're trying to achieve, and work backwards from there. And then you infuse strategic consideration, timing consideration, of course, financial and return on investment consideration in those in our approach, and really thinking through everything that we do. So
that makes sense. One thing I've noticed in the financial services industry, and then the CFO focus within large companies, is there is software that you buy, might be like your GL software solution, but then there's a lot of like third-party services that are used. How do you think about those third-party services being affected by Gen AI? Like, is that something that's on near-term roadmap, long-term roadmap?
It's really interesting because internally we're in our long-range planning season, right? So I did that with my marketing team and our technology and tech partner internally in all of the MarTech. We did the same thing with fintech, because I think, and I was just reviewing that paper with the team a couple weeks ago, and very similar concept, right? Similar approach in the sense that thinking about all sorts of different data set, customer behavior data set that goes into drive our product and experiences, to obviously financial output and financial data. And what we are really trying to make sure that we're doing right now is those data set are connected. And you'd be surprised, and maybe not surprisingly, many of times those are not. And even for Audible, it's a work in progress, right? Because those are expensive. And depending on how these systems or tools were built over the years, we kind of have a lot of bolt-on and patchwork. And so we're internally really examining, like, how do we actually get those underlying data set into a way where it's more seamless, because into the future, if the idea is that different part of the function, a procurement module or agent, or a financial analysis agent, or book closing agent and whatnot, or scenario planning agent, those need to sit on a seamless data tech stack. And so we're really kind of thinking through, like, what would it take to do that, while thinking about kind of the user layer of like these different tools, and how do we think about that? So again, trying to stay nimble and trying to like not build a monolith like platform, but like think of those as discrete use cases and functionality, but need to be connected through the data layer.
It totally makes sense. And that, what you're talking about, like the data infrastructure layer, that sounds like something that would be like a build internal.
That would be something that we wouldn't outsource that, right? And also because, again, data privacy it's core to our DNA in terms of maintaining trust with customer. Like, those are definitely internal. However, the layer on top of the interface of different tools, we're open to looking at different, fit for purpose solution that could then be built on top, but not in a patchwork way, but like a more integrated way.
That totally makes sense. And when I think about like in the venture-backed companies that have created really big outcomes in the past 10 years, the data infrastructure companies like a Snowflake or a MongoDB and databases, they have been some of the biggest outcomes.
Yep.
And then, it's almost like that had to be like what you're doing as sort of an internal focus has been external for maybe smaller companies or companies that don't have like the ability to do it internally. Yeah. And that's like a layer that everybody needs to do the application work on top of it. So it's a really interesting journey that you're on.
It's really interesting because like when we take a step back and thinking about like customer facing or marketing function facing or internal finance and even HR and other G&A function solution, the approach is actually very similar, making sure that the data and underlying data infrastructure is there, whatever data it is, right? Because nowadays everything is driven by data. And then how we then build on top of it, the different tools and solution can be, some of them we can buy, some of them we can build, and then is thinking about how to integrate. Because I don't think that there is as complex of a business we are and growing globally. I think it's really hard to think of building something as a monolith nowadays.
Agreed. That makes my head spin. So I think the approach you're describing
because
makes a lot of
that is
sense.
like totally one-way door.
Yes,
because
that's
it's
right.
Such
and a multi-year project.
Exactly. It's such expensive. And nowadays tools are, again, like the speed at which these advancements are going, like just doesn't make sense for the business.
Yeah. Now, if you think about, you talked a little bit about this before, kind of interacting with, let's say, startups or like medium-sized companies. They should know your business. They should be, do the research, sort of think about the fit for purpose build out for Audible. What other advice would you give to founders?
I would say come in and talk to us. Listen and ask the right question of what we're trying to achieve. And don't just think about it as a sales pitch.
Yeah.
Think of it as a partnership, because we are looking for partners, big or small.
Yeah.
And we're looking for partners that would help us create value ultimately as a business, right? And so I would say like really just spend time with us and ask questions that are more unique to our space, understanding what we do at Audible and what are we trying to achieve.
Great. That's awesome advice. Well, Cynthia, thanks so much for being here today.
Thanks
really
for
appreciate
having
it.
me.